Good morning, everybody. I am here to talk Tao of the day, as I love doing so often. It is an early day. It's a little before 6 a.m. here, and I am always up to, chatting about what the Tao has in store for you today. So, I am coming on a little bit early because I am going to be doing a walkthrough. I got workshops coming up that you guys should know about. So if you're interested in joining me for a workshop, my workshops start next week, Tuesday. I'm going to be doing a walkthrough today of my workshop. I got a series of. I'm going to be doing 6 of these workshops over the next 6 weeks, and so I'm just going to be doing any tweaking, anything to make sure that we're all prepped. So I got a workshop that I'm going to be walking through probably it's going to be in 4 hours from now, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to do Tao of the day, and then I'm coming out early enough to just attract new people or not necessarily get into a 3-hour conversation. I want to be able to save some of my energy, so I'm starting a little early. So if you have a number between 1 and 81 you would like to choose, come on up. Let's talk a little bit about Tao of the day. I'm Martin John. I host Tao of the Day. I also host the Recover Yourself workshop. The Recover Yourself workshop and podcast, actually. All things Recover Yourself are coming from me, Martin John, and I want to help you recover yourself. I take a limited number of clients one-on-one every month, and if you benefit from my work, I always let you know that you can tip me over on Venmo at martinjohn_Garcia. So as we explore the Tao today, I'm going to pick a number, and I'm going to go ahead and pick a number from a translation that I don't use very often, but the Isabella Mears version. The Isabella Mears it was translated in 1916, and Isabel is a little more flowery, and so it's always a little more difficult to translate her work, but I always really love kind of dipping into that because it is from such a different time. So yeah, I'm gonna come here and pick a number. I don't know what number I want to pick. Let me see. If you have a number that's like, you know on fire in you right now, why don't you come up and give me a number, and I'll use Stephen Mitchell's translation. It's definitely a quintessential translation of the Tao Te Ching. And yeah, what is the Tao Te Ching, you might ask? The Tao Te Ching is an ancient text written in about 600 BCE. And it's about the same time that they say the Old Testament was written. And we think about this, and 600 BCE doesn't really sound like that much. All that long ago, but it was. let me just let you know. 600 years between that and Christ, right? Like 600 years between the beginning of our calendar, and we're here in the year 2000. So 600 years, just a quarter of that. That's a long time. It's a long time. So yeah, ancient text, 600 BCE, and written by Lao Tzu. It translates to the canon of reason. I don't know what number I want to do. Let me see if I can pick number. I can pick any number I want. I'm going to go with 4. We're going to see what 4 has to say. Tao is infinite. If we use it, we find it inexhaustible, deep. It appears to be the ancestor of all things. It rounds our angles. It unravels our difficulties. It harmonizes our light. It brings our atoms into unity, pure. It appears to be everlasting in principle. I do not know whose son it is. It existed before God was manifest in form. Wow. This last line, it existed before God was manifest in form. Like God, such a beautiful thing. Okay, so Tao. Here's an interesting thing about the way I see the Tao Te Ching and God and all of this kind of stuff. Okay, so what we see here is Tao is infinite. It existed before God was manifest in form. How beautiful is that, right? Because I recognize God as being sort of like the edge of the universe, right? Like, so Tao being that feminine, God being that masculine form on top of it, right? Tao will never be manifest in form. Tao is always substance. God is structure. This is kind of how I understand the difference between God and Tao. Um, Tao is in everything, and then everything is in God, right? So this is how I understand Tao. This isn't necessarily right. There's no right. So I'm not trying to say I'm right about this, but Tao existed before God was manifest in form. And I look at that edge of the universe. You know, we talk about the universe, right? The universe is great. Or we say the universe will provide. Well, that could be God, right? God will provide. There's an edge of that. That edge is that structure. We need that structure in order to experience Tao. Otherwise, Tao will take us in and um, we will no longer, it will yield to us to such a degree that we will no longer exist, right? Like, as things as things go, we need an edge in order to have um an semblance of being. You know, we have, in order to be manifest, there needs to be an edge, and our skin is not going to be a strong enough edge. God is a strong enough edge to hold itself, to hold its own against Tao, against the, that is the ultimate masculine, sitting on top of the ultimate feminine. That which is void is able to be experienced because of something manifest. So that is powerful in and of itself. Tao is infinite. Okay, so if we are going to bring this masculine and feminine, and I'm just gonna dive right in, and I'm gonna do that. So Tao is infinite. The feminine of all things, the ultimate feminine, is infinite, without end. Okay, now this is the only thing that this is the only thing that can exist as only one of the two great aspects, right? So you have masculine and you have feminine. Tao is the only thing that can exist without the other. Right? Tao is the feminine that can exist without the masculine. Tao is everywhere. Tao is void. Tao is the only thing that can exist without masculine. You can't experience it. Nothing can experience Tao until masculine is laid on top of it, but it still exists whether or not you can experience it. And so Tao is infinite. This is what, and we can't understand infinite, right? Like, I have an episode of the Recover Yourself podcast, which I talk to my good friend and spiritual. He's not. I wouldn't even call him a spiritual teacher. He's just a dude that is probably better than all of the people that claim to be spiritual teachers. And he talks about our understanding of infinite, right? We understand infinite as, okay, yes, I understand the word infinite, and then I have this definition for it, and I put it in a little box, and boom, now I understand infinite. But that's the thing, like, Tao is infinite. You can't you can't comprehend. If you think you can comprehend what infinite is, you're already off track. So let's take a step back and say Tao is infinite. Tao, the ultimate feminine, is the infinite, is the thing that in Tao is the only thing that can exist, that is so powerful, it can exist without a masculine form. Once again, cannot be experienced, cannot be experienced because of its infinite nature and because of of its vastness, because it just swallows everything that touches it, until we found the manifest until God was manifest in form. When God was manifest in form, the infiniteness of Tao was able to be compartmentalized and separated into things, right? And it was only able to be separated into things inside of God. Okay, so God is the next most powerful thing, is what we end up kind of finding here. If we used it, we find it inexhaustible. If we can use the infinite of Tao, if we can use Tao in our lives, then we will find it inexhaustible. And the thing is it's not even in your life; it's within you to use it. And that is that is the source of all things. That is the source of your ability to manifest. That is the source of your ability to create. That is the source of your ability to breathe. So be here in the void. Now, understand that just like a house, the space in the house is the same space that is outside of the house. But when you're in the house, you have compartmentalized and you have separated out that space so that you can experience it separately. You can experience this block of space separately than the space all over. I know when I was homeless, that was a really difficult thing. Being on the street was a difficult thing for me because I didn't have walls. I wasn't able to compartmentalize and see space differently. And so it was all just infinite. There was this infinite amount of space, infinite amount of time, infinite amount of everything all around me. And I wasn't able to experience the separateness. Like I wasn't able to experience, because my mind can't grasp the vastness of space. But if we can use it, and that's the thing, the vastness of Tao, when we use it, it's inexhaustible. So here within us, Tao is infinite. When we use it, we find it inexhaustible. Deep, right? Really deep. This is the depths that you can have. But when you can't, if you don't use it, then you're gonna constantly find yourself at a loss. And trust me, when I was out on the street and all of that kind of stuff, what ended up happening was I was exhausted all the time. Why was I exhausted? Because I wasn't able to use that space, any space around me. It just depleted. It escaped me, not because it was gone, but because I couldn't wield it. I couldn't wield that infinite nature of space. It was just always more. And I had no walls. That's why walls are so important. It just gives you a place to collect your thoughts. Even if it's a cardboard box, you can sit in it and you can be quiet because you have space. And in that space exists the infinite. But if you find yourself within the infinite, you are immediately enveloped by it, which is why God is an important aspect, and we'll find out about that a little later in this chapter. It appears to be, and I'm going to throw in the word "the" here. It appears to be the ancestor of all things. Now, what it says in this translation, it appears to be ancestor of all things. Ancestor being capitalized. Okay, so when we see the capitalizing, we have to think about it in a little different way. Tao is infinite. If we use it, it is inexhaustible. We've expressed this already. It appears to be ancestor of all things. This is the mother, the great mother. We talked about this yesterday on Tao of the Day. I don't recall which translation, who I was talking to about that, but it appears to be the Great Mother. And I know Graciela and I spoke a lot about the Great Mother and Mother Earth and all of these things. And And I totally agree that it is a Mother Earth, but Mother Earth has a structure, thus it is masculine as well. Like Earth is not great enough to be just feminine. It does not, um, it does not have the ability to be just one thing, right? Because Tao, as we spoke earlier, Tao is the only thing that is powerful enough, large enough, and able to yield to the extent that it can just be feminine. And it will take everything until we have something strong enough to be able to hold a structure within that space. So it appears to be ancestor of all things. And this is just, once again, this is just my understanding. And this doesn't mean that I'm right. This doesn't mean that I know what I'm talking about. Like I'm just making this up as I go. I've been doing this for, well over 15 years, reading the Tao and trying to understand, not even understand in a brain sense, although that may sound like what I'm doing. I want to understand it in my heart, and then be able to understand, because it is enough to just understand it in your heart. That's it. That's all you need to do, is understand that you are Tao, that is infinite. But when I get to a place where I can understand it, I also want, because I'm human, because I am living in this time and space, I do want to express it in a way that is understood on a deeper level. So Tao is infinite. If we use it, we find it inexhaustible, deep. It appears to be the ancestor of all things. It rounds our angles. It unravels our difficulties. It harmonizes our light. It brings our atoms into unity. Now, all of those are great. It rounds our angles. Like, what are our angles? Those are our rigid sort of understandings of the world around us, possibly. It unravels our difficulties. When we have difficulties, it's not saying it's going to solve our difficulties. It's not saying it's going to fix our problems, but it unravels them so that we can see them better, so that we can separate. Oh, like this is here and this is here, and I can see these as one. It harmonizes our light. But this one, it brings our atoms into unity. That's the one that really resonates strongly with me. This idea that it's bringing our atoms into unity. Everything is made up of atoms, and so and so I am a believer that all things do have consciousness. Even a rock comes into consciousness, and these are just concepts. And I do know that other people hold this concept as well. That we're not fluidly conscious. If we were fluidly conscious, we would be able to understand many more things than we currently do. I think we come into consciousness, kind of like film, 30 frames a second, right? Like, so we come into consciousness in such a way that it seems fluid, but we're actually coming in and out of consciousness at all times. And for brief moments, we're coming into consciousness, and then for brief moments we're coming out of consciousness. And a rock might come into consciousness for one of those cycles a year, and we're coming into one of those cycles maybe 1,000 times a second. And so it's really interesting when we start to think like, oh well, if the atoms come into unity in a rock, and a rock doesn't have any resistance, well, it can manifest fairly easily, but it's also not aware of the time passing. But I love this kind of, it brings our atoms into unity. It's bringing our atoms into unity, so that as I talk about addiction and other things like that, it's interesting to think about like our atoms and our cells, and how they regenerate, and how they continue to help us maintain who we are. And I always want to try and make sure that this is all kind of in staying in on topic. I don't want to fall off topic, because things can break free so easily. It is the ancestor of all things. It's bringing our atoms into unity. If we use it, we find it inexhaustible. This is an interesting one, and once again, Isabel Mears, she's translated in 1916, and so I always want to make sure that I give it enough space, and I don't I don't jump the gun too much and try and make too many definitions of it. So, Tao is infinite. If we use it, we find it inexhaustible. Deep. It appears to be the ancestor of all things. So, what does rounding our angles, raveling our difficulties, harmonizing our light, and bringing our atoms into unities have to do with being the ancestor of all things? Or does ancestor of all things, if we use it, we find it inexhaustible? Tao is infinite. Okay, I could see those things connecting, right? Because, like, again, this isn't necessarily trying to, it's forcing me to do a little work. It appears to be the ancestor of all things. We find it inexhaustible. It is infinite. It is within us. If we use it, which is, it is within us. It is the ancestor of all things. Now, it rounds our angles, unravels our difficulties, harmonizes our light, and brings atoms into unity, pure. When your atoms are out of unity, you're going to get sick. Right? That's just like, that's cancer. That is all sorts of stuff. If your atoms are not in unity, if your cells are not working together, you are going to fall apart. And your atoms might not be in unity because you're not harmonizing. You're allowing your difficulties to control your life. You're allowing your difficulties to control your feelings, and you're too rigid. This is where it rounds our angles, unravels our difficulties, harmonizes our light being our intelligence, that thing, that light within us, and it brings our atoms into unity. So the atoms into unity is the body, harmonizes our light is the spirit, unravels our difficulties or the toils of life, rounds our angles is our intellect, right? I think, right? It rounds our angles, our intellect, could be considered our angles. Geometry. You know, there's that line in Alien Covenant. Nature doesn't build in straight lines. And it's true. It's interesting. As an artist, in straight lines, weird thing. It rounds our angles. Your eyes are round, and so you don't see straight lines. You can't, because everything about your eye is round. The lens and the place where it's getting reflected and everything is actually round. But your brain knows how to try and create straight lines. So that's interesting. I don't know. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So then it just says pure. It appears to be everlasting in principle. I do not know whose son it is. It existed before God was manifest in form. It appears to be everlasting in principle. That's the first time I've ever recognized a translation say, hey, in principle, it appears to be everlasting. And I'm intrigued as to how Stephen Mitchell says that. It is hidden but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It's older than God. It appears to be everlasting in principle. I don't know whose son it is. It existed before God was manifest in form. Isabel, as she translates this, she's being, and again, this was over 100 years ago. She translated this, but she's being really lenient. She's not translating this and making the heavy statement, like Stephen Mitchell. It is hidden but always present. Like, that is obviously a paradox, and but it is hidden within us, right? It is hidden within us. It appears to be everlasting in form, meaning that it is hidden within us, and when we die, it turns into, like, none of that space is left. None of that space is gone. All of that space that we took up is still here. And when we, like, experience death or whatever, all of those cells, all of the space within each of those cells stays and it gets eaten and it by itself and it just continues to perpetuate. But I love that Isabel Mears here is not taking that leap, and she says it appears to be everlasting in principle. And she has these two ways of saying, like, it appears to be, and then in principle. So both of those are protecting, saying something like, it is always there, it is always present. It appears to be everlasting in principle. And I think, like maybe the reason that I picked this today is because I may be, I may pussyfoot around too many things. I might pussyfoot around making huge statements about my work, even though my work deserves huge statements, and I know it. You know, so as I'm reading this, it's interesting for me to kind of point out and to allow this to take up so much of my attention. Right? It appears to be everlasting in principle. I don't know whose son it is. It existed before God was manifest in form. And she doesn't take any she doesn't take any liberties with talking about if it's everlasting or if it's infinite, right? She says the Tao is infinite and then it's everlasting in principle. So even though you aren't going to last forever, the Tao within you is going to be here and is going to continue to affect the world. I don't know whose son it is. It existed before God was manifest in form. She then makes this really harsh statement about God, which I think is beautiful, especially done in, early turn of the century, turn of the last century. It existed before God was manifest in form. That doesn't, she's not saying that God didn't exist. She's saying that in order, like God existed within the Tao, of course, but then when it existed in form, that was when everything can be created. That was the creation, right? The creation of the edge of the universe. Tao is infinite. If we use it, we find it inexhaustible, deep. It appears to be the ancestor of all things. It rounds our angles, it unravels our difficulties, it harmonizes our light, it brings our atoms into unity, pure. It appears to be everlasting in principle. I do not know whose son it is. It existed before God was manifest in form. That is number 4 for me today. If anybody is interested in jumping on and having a conversation about the Tao of the day. If you have a number you'd like to share, step on up. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, I'm going to start wrapping it up. This is Martin John. I host the Recover Yourself podcast. I have workshops coming up. I got 6 weeks. They are 3-hour workshops that happen every Tuesday over the next 6 weeks. If you're interested, definitely check out my bio, hit up my workshops, and if you like what I do on Tao of the Day, I would invite you also to go on to my link tree and write up a testimonial for me. Joshua, how you doing, man?
Good, John. Good. I was listening and getting some delicious juju out of what you were saying.
Oh,
And
well, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So and then you made the offer and the invitation, so I figured I'd jump on up.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely. So
yeah,
I know you've been here for Tao of the Day before. So do you have a number
yeah.
between 1 and 81?
18.
Mm-hmm. All
Mm-hmm.
right, so we're going to
L'chaim.
be, we are moving over to Stephen Mitchell. Stephen
Okay.
Mitchell is my go-to. That was the translation that really kicked off my relationship with the Tao so many years ago. All
Mm.
right, so this is a this is this there's a handful of chapters, and this is one of them that talks about dissolution. Right, this is how
Mm.
when we start to lose touch with Tao. there
Hmm.
is a dissolution in our bodies or in our communities or what have you. So number 18 states, when the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. When the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and knowledge step forth. When there is no peace in family, filial piety begins. When the country falls into chaos, patriotism is born.
Like there's no virtue without the need for it to arise.
Well, as you lose touch with Tao, you will
Hmm.
like I maybe what we can look at is when you lose touch with Tao, you lean on virtue. But when you lean on virtue, you know you will eventually kind of slip into like this husk of acting as if you're virtuous.
Acting.
Well, you know, virtue has a look to it, you know. You
Yeah, I
know, like
suppose.
like if you like virtue actually exists in your heart, right? Like you
Uh-huh.
have these things, but when we look outside of ourselves
Mm.
and we're like, oh, this is what virtue looks like, let me go through these rituals. And as I go through
Mm.
these rituals, I seem to be virtuous. Well, because I seem to be virtuous and people believe I'm virtuous, I can speak in a way that is virtuous because I know how to do that. I've seen that happen. I've recognized virtue in others. And then
And then
this
the
is,
Lord cometh down.
right. And then, this
Yeah.
is when the country falls into chaos. What is the country? The country is your body here, possibly.
Right.
The country is
Right.
it's a whole, and so when the country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. And what is patriotism if not just flag waving? And then here's your body
Grandstanding.
flag waving. What's it? Grandstanding, right? And it's like I am. It's like now we're stuck in the ego. Now we're stuck in your definition of who you think you are.
Mm.
That is the that is the identifying with the identity, right? Don't identify with
Mm.
that. Like so I'm going to read this again because it's so short. When the great
Yeah.
Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. So
Because you need
right
to prove
there.
it to yourself.
Well, you need right. And what is goodness if not defined by something? Right? Goodness
Mm.
looks a
Yeah.
certain way. But when you are at one with the Tao, maybe you don't do things that are good, quote unquote. Maybe you do things that look to other people as bad, but you know in your heart that you're being guided by God or Tao or whatever. You now
Mm.
are in this place of like, I am doing what is my nature, but my nature
Mm.
might not always be good. We have like I've heard it stated that all of the animals in on the planet have their nature, and
Yeah.
man has all of those, right? so
Mm.
so we look at the, let's say, we look at the nature of the lion. Well,
Hmm.
that is in man as well. And we look at the nature of the jackal, and that's in man. And like, so each and every one of us have all of these.
Hmm.
But if you try to look like you're doing a good thing, or if you try to look like like, once you have a definition of what is good, you turn off things that are now deemed bad. But the things that are deemed bad might be the best thing for you to do right now.
Mm.
Just because just because it looks bad doesn't mean it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting this really weird vision of like the Boondock Saints.
Okay.
I, I can't, I don't know. I mean, just because it looks bad doesn't mean it is.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to justify any kind of behavior like that, but it's it's an interesting, like, and you mentioned mental faculty and like um I got this idea of like finesse and like trying
Mm.
to finagle and like mentally mentally maneuver through, and that really takes, I mean, if you're in your mind, you're out of your heart.
Right. And in your mind is where the outward appearance of goodness and piety
Mm-hmm.
are expressed, right? The outward appearance, like
Mm.
real respect, real piousness, real like respect for all things around you
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come because you don't eat meat or because you don't pick flowers or because you don't do something. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
like it once you have a definition, you have closed off everything beyond that. And the Tao is everything beyond that, right? God is everything beyond that. So it's not about closing off, but it's
Mm-hmm.
about staying open.
Yeah. 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 There's a whole lot of synchronicity in my life that's about staying open,
Yeah.
especially when you know there's an urge to collapse around something and go, that's it right there. I
Right.
found it. No, no, you didn't. You found that's the booby prize.
That's right. You know, when you have children,
Mm-hmm.
when you do one thing for one child and that turned out good,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be the same solution you take for the other child.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stay open to the possibility of those things changing and the way you respond changing from one child to the next. You have to be present with the Tao at this moment to guide you to give the child what it needs rather than what you think it needs. And this is that idea of I have cemented myself in the good, and so this was good. But just because it was good this year for this child at this time doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
that solution is going to be good for this other child at this other time in this other space.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Go
so
ahead.
when the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. Your goodness now appears. Now the definitions start to come in. Now we start talking about the body's intelligence. The body's intelligence is like your intuition, and that's the thing that guides you, right? That's the thing that is bringing you. But when your body's intuition, when the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and knowledge step forth.
Because you're no longer in your body, you're in your head trying to figure it out.
Right. So all of a sudden you're looking for shortcuts and the right answer rather than
Uh-huh.
trusting that, you know what, there is no right answer. The answer will present itself and it's
Yeah.
going to be the answer. It's not about being right or wrong, it is about being the answer.
Right. Outside of your need to like it or approve of it being the answer, because it just
Right.
reveals itself and that's the way that it is.
Yeah. And what do
Yeah.
we, like there's so many experiments out there where we, trick the brain into making a choice. Are there's experiments, they have someone, they coax that person to make a choice, and when you ask that person why did you make that choice, they tell you the reason they made the choice, which they made up completely because they're not aware that they were coaxed to make the choice. Cleverness. That's cleverness and knowledge step forth when the body's intelligence declines. You start to tell
Mm.
yourself why you're making decisions rather than just making them, rather than just
My,
saying this is the decision I want to make. You
mm.
you start to lean on cleverness and knowledge. I have ways in, I have ways out, and I know. I think the biggest gift for me is the ability to say I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I say that a lot.
It's good. It's good. It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
And I had a
I
client like I had a client ask me the other day. It was just like, well, what should I do? And I was just like, is this my life or yours?
oh, I like that one.
And I, and
Yeah.
and they were like, it's mine. And I was like, then what the fuck are you asking me for? Uh, go
Uh-huh.
go go and figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
That you have the tool to see. Now go figure out what to do. Like,
Mm.
like that's all I can do for you is tell you where it is. Now you got to just find your way there. Like, I'm not going to make your route for you. I just
Right.
pointed it out on the map.
It's there's this one step at a time thing that humans don't do very well, I find.
Right? We really like a destination.
Yeah.
And
And we
when
really
I
like
get
autopilot on the way.
right, when I get my
Yeah.
clients on a path of just like, look, there is no destination. You're here. They
Mhm.
recognize that they are moving somewhere, and so they got to pick their head up rather than keeping their head down looking at maps all the time. Like, do I
Yeah.
have how far until, like, I remember when I used to drive around and use actual, paper maps. And and
I remember
and
those
now,
days. Yeah.
and you would say, okay, the next thing I'm looking for is X. And you would just
Yeah.
drive. You would just drive and wait until that thing came. Now you don't look at what you're looking for next. You look at the map and go, okay, I'm not at the next point yet. So I got to keep going into, and so it's always destination. It's not like I'm here looking for something. I'm here looking for this one thing. I'm waiting to get to the next place rather than being present and aware that yes, in this landscape that I'm taking in, I'm looking for a thing. I'm looking for an exit number. I'm looking, we don't, I mean, I talk to people,
Yeah.
like they don't know.
I remember as a kid going, "Oh, the next exit we need to get off at is exit, 24."
Hmm.
And this word exit, "Oh, we're just passing exit number 7." That means we have how many miles, kids? Like how
Right.
many and then we have to like mentally and then we can mentally like think about it and plan, visualize as we're going through, it's been a couple minutes and now we're at exit number 11 or 12. Oh, we got about this much more time, and you can kind of synchronize your brain,
And you can
to
also be present.
mhm, mhm,
You can be here
mhm,
now. You can look out the window and be like, well, we got time and I
mhm,
know what number it is. So if we pass it, we'll know right away. But how much
mhm.
fear is there in us now? Like, it's like, oh, recalculating.
And in those like few moments of recalculating, is this gonna be a 1 mile turnaround or a 10 mile turnaround? Because
Hmm.
are we in the city or are we in the country right now?
Right.
Yeah,
No,
all
I
that
might.
anxiety. Yeah,
Right. It just kind of builds up, right? Immediately.
yeah.
As soon as recalculating.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so in this last line, when the country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. I like to look at country as all of the, of course, the big country, but then also your body or your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So
like
if it's your family, can you say the line again?
when the
When
country falls into, if the family falls into chaos, patriotism is born. Patriotism is like, and come back up if you fall out. Let me think about this for a second. When a country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. That's tribalism. That's like
mm,
standing by like your family. Let's say your family is racist.
mm,
When the family is abusive and all this other stuff, like, well, everybody's going to stand behind, this concept of this family, the husk of this family, rather than being
yeah.
you as an individual and still part of the family.
Yeah, gotta keep up appearances. Keeping up with the
Right.
Joneses comes around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll come up real quick for a
Please do.
second here.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. And I would agree with that. That it is a very much a keeping up with the Joneses, a keeping up with the tribe. Tribalism is huge, especially right now. This idea of like my group is better than your group, and when a country falls into chaos, like, I mean, we could talk about Russia right now. We could even talk about the United States. We could talk about a lot of different things. But when we talk about it as family, you know when
Mhm,
when when there are people in the family that are kind of making things difficult for other people in the family, um,
mhm.
you start to separate into parts, and you say, okay, I'm on Uncle Jim's side, or I'm on your side. Like, we're not vaccinators, and we're all getting vaccinated, and then we come together, and then there's
Yeah.
like these fractions or
Like,
factions.
like dish soap on an like dish soap on a pan of water with a little bit of oil on it,
Yeah. It just kind of
and it
poof.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then
See
that's
the
the grandstanding. That's the flag waving.
Yeah. And so the antidote is, and here I go into my head, right? Like,
Mhm.
so it's
Mhm.
not the if there is an antidote, it's just to be present and respond to the moment as it arises.
Right, because all of that happens when the great Tao is forgotten. And trust me,
Mm.
the great Tao is forgotten. The best we can do is move up this chain, going from patriotism to
Uh-huh.
filial piety. And we didn't read that line, but when there is no peace in the family, filial piety begins. That means respect for the father, whether the father deserves respect or not. Right? Respect
Mm.
for that lineage, whether that lineage deserves respect or not. You put them
Right.
ahead of you so that you stay in that, which then, when the country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. Those two things kind of one after the other, right? So you go from patriotism to filial piety to being clever to being
Mm-hmm.
good to the Tao, right? We have to we have to make our way up that. I think most of the
Yeah.
world, um, there's many of us here on Wisdom might be sitting in the cleverness and knowledge base camp right now and want to move
Mm-hmm.
up to just being good and pious before we can move on. You can't miss a step. This is something that Andy Scarantino here says. Like, she's like, you can't miss a step. You have to take every step. You don't have to hang out there very long, but you have to
Right.
take that step. You know, there are people out there right now who are very patriotic and grandstanding and flag waving and doing all that stuff, and they're going to have to move into that filial piety. They're going to have to move into respecting the lineage, respecting, let's just call this out, right? Respecting the fact that the people voted, right?
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
filial piety as it relates to this country in the United States right now, where
Yeah.
we're not respecting the father of the house, right? We're not respecting the one person that we all put in office, right? And so
Based on the
because of
rules
that,
of the game. Yeah.
right, based on the rules of the game, we have this thing, and so that's filial piety. And so people have crumbled from filial piety, chaos. The country fell into chaos, and patriotism was born. Now people are being patriotic by not respecting filial piety. Those people will move into filial piety on a healing path, and this might take lifetimes for them. Who knows?
Right.
They'll
Right.
move into filial piety, and then from filial piety, they'll move into cleverness and knowledge. And I think that, when
Mm.
like, and I don't want to say that, like, anybody's on a level or whatever. Everybody's where they're at, and that's beautiful, and we respect that. But, like,
Right.
I look at people here on Wisdom, and we really love how clever we are. We really love how knowledgeable we are. We really love what we have to say and listen to ourselves talk. And I put myself in that category as well. So we're at this place of cleverness and knowledge, and then we'll move into, as we continue to get closer to Tao, we'll move into goodness and piety. And when we're there,
Mm.
we'll get glimpses of Tao. We'll get glimpses of Brahman, as Dr. Rao says, right? And as we
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as we continue to be confident in our, and confident is a shitty word, but that's the best one we have, confident in who we are, and our ability to, and who we are, not in our identity, but in our godliness, in our connection to Tao, we will.
What if it's what if a better word than confident is knowledgeable and present? I guess confident kind of wraps up those two together.
Yeah, I think so. And again, it's not,
Yeah.
it's an abstract confidence. It's not like I'm walking
Yeah.
around like I just, like, made $1 million and got off 6 women, right? Like, it's not like that kind of confidence. It's
Yeah.
not that kind of
Yeah.
confidence, right? It's a confidence
Yeah.
that it's that quiet confidence of knowing your God,
Right.
right? And that's a
Right. That's a
deeper
stillness.
thing, right? That has nothing to do with knowledge, because you
Right.
could do that without any knowledge. Like, my cat does that better than I do. And my cat
Yeah.
doesn't have any knowledge of Tao. It just lives
Right.
Tao,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
that's what
And
it is.
and trust me, my cat is confident. My cat doesn't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like
It's a cat. That's what cats
yeah,
do.
you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
so as you know, and that's why I like these verses that really kind of talk about how does it dissolve? How does our
Mm.
understanding of how does our godliness get dissolved? And if we said like you are God until you're good, and you are good until you're intelligent, and you are intelligent until you fight with family, and you'll fight with family until you fight with your country. And at that
And then
point,
you go back to being God.
well, at that point, when you're fighting with your country, then you have nothing. Like then you're fighting with yourself, right? Like you fight with family, and then you
Right.
fight with everything that's around you. You are now at war with the world,
Yeah.
and that's the dissolution. That's the dissolving of your godliness. Like you were born to be God
So it sounds like resistance at different scales.
at different levels.
Yeah. And if you can move through resistance and not resist the the moment that is the feelings that create those levels of discord, it sounds like the trick might be in order to not dissolve.
Well, if it's a
Right.
trick, you're
Yeah.
at cleverness and knowledge, and that's what I said
Yeah.
earlier, right? Most of us here are at that cleverness and knowledge. Like we're trying to hack shit out. We're trying like, oh, the hack for living your life and for understanding and for no, you just got to do it. There ain't no fucking trick.
Yeah.
You just got to sit there
Right.
and fucking live this moment, whatever this moment has
Right.
to offer you. I don't give a fuck if it hurts. Don't define it. Resist your need, or resist the invitation to define it, as well
Hmm.
as the invitation to blame, right? Like just be here in it. It's not anybody else. It's not hard. It's not, I mean, it's not easy, because if it was easy, then you'd experience something hard at some point. So it just is. It doesn't have it doesn't exist on a scale. It exists in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. That's
No, no,
beautiful. I mean,
that's a good place to put it.
yeah.
Joshua, thank you so much for joining me. This was a nice one. It was
Yeah.
coming on early, so not everybody. And
Yeah.
I heard your family leave, and so my best to them, and I hope they have
Thank you.
wonderful days as well as yourself.
Yeah. I just stepped out into the garage. They're still in the same spot. I just kind of like this is noisy. I need to remove myself
Oh
from the
no, yeah,
situation.
yeah, yeah. No, that's quite all right. Quite all right.
Yeah.
Well, I really
Well, cool,
appreciate
man,
you
John. Thank
coming
you.
up and talking about this, and
Yeah.
we'll be in touch
Thank you.
again.
All right. Sounds great. Have a great day.
You
Cheers.
as well. Wow, that was really nice. I was closing out, and Joshua came up, and we got to really dig into 18, man. Wow. And we really dug into it. I really love those ones that talk about the dissolving of the nature of the Tao within our individual selves. It's a big thing to understand. It's important to know that it happens, and it's important to know where we're at. Nah, it's not important to know where we're at, as long as we just keep opening up to who we are. Well, thank you so much. Once again, I'm Martin John. If you benefit from the work I do, consider giving me a tip over at Venmo at _Garcia. You can also check out my link tree. If you like what I do and have some words for me, even if you don't like what I do and have some words for me, um, you can leave a testimonial, which you can find on my link tree. You can find a place to offer a testimonial to me, Martin John, about Tao of the Day or other work. If you like my podcast, or if you are interested in my workshop, you'll find links to my workshop there. So until next time, thank you so much once again. I am going to be signing off, and be sure that if you are digging what I'm doing and want to really start to recover who you are, be sure to join me for a Recover Yourself workshop. They're the same workshop, but I got six coming up every Tuesday for the next 6 weeks, starting next week. So if you are interested, definitely join me for that. Okay, this is going to be my official sign off. Until next time, keep recovering yourself.